Vestibular input helps us interpret movement of our head. We have fluid in our inner ear canals that moves and changes directions as our head moves and changes directions. It lets our brains know where our heads are in space. Vestibular input allows our bodies to know if we're sitting still or spinning, if we're moving fast or slow, and if we're moving with gravity or against gravity. It also allows us to determine which direction we are going and coordinate our eye movements with our head movements. Spinning, turning, and climbing all rely on our vestibular sense.
I'll describe red flags that can characterize different patterns of dysfunction that all fall under that very big vestibular umbrella. So first up, we have a child who is very fearful and insecure during movement activities where their feet need to come off the ground. That can include things like climbing or swinging or even just being picked up and being held. If your child has a big emotional response with things like that, they may have difficulties modulating vestibular input. Then we have children who have difficulties with balance or demonstrate poor posture, another big red flag. A third would be a child who has difficulties with using their eyes while their posture is challenged or while the body is moving. And then we have a fourth red flag, which would be difficulties with bilateral coordination or just generally using the body in symmetrical movements while doing gross motor activities. Then finally, kind of going along with the last one, difficulties moving in sequence with a rhythm or when considering timing. If your child is generally uncoordinated, then there may be some difficulties with vestibular processing. Generally, I like to be mindful of the different types of vestibular sensations. We have linear movement, we have angular movement, and rotary movement, and thinking about how to do activities that can really emphasize one of those types of sensations or use it in combination with one another. I also like to think about how the child is positioned during those activities, if they're sitting or standing or laying down, because that can provide a different type of vestibular input to the nervous system. I also like to think about how to combine vestibular input with other sensations, so other sensory systems. Especially if I have a child who is very insecure with vestibular input, then lots of proprioception would come into play there. We can also use auditory to address timing and symmetry. And then, of course, we have different activities that may include combining vestibular input with vision. So activities where either the child is moving and what they're looking at is stable, or they're stable and what they're looking at is moving. There's a lot of variety with vestibular activities, and they're super fun to include in our sessions.